MOON. That spells YouTube. Help us to make your stand. Welcome to the Clark the Shark channel, everybody. I'm your host, Clark the Shark, and I love Stephen King's The Stand so much we're doing a video today called 9 Questions About The Stand. Now, I love the book first and foremost. I love the 94 miniseries a lot too. I've probably seen that close to 20 times. And I have seen the 2020 miniseries once. But I do have some questions and some theories, and I need your help, Stephen King, The Stan, viewers and fans, to help answer them for me. So let's kick it off with number 1. Were the folks at Project Blue gassed? The reason I pose that question is there were no obvious signs of Captain Trips that I remember on the staff at Blue Base. There were also folks that kind of had different timelines of dying. There was one man with his head in a bowl of soup, from what I remember, and then there was a couple that were just about to engage in sexual relations. So if they were dying from the flu as quickly as others, how would that happen? So maybe they were gassed. That would kind of play into the whole government cover-up of let's keep Trips quiet and let's just get rid of everybody on the base and be done with it. If you remember when General Starkey goes back down in the book to the Blue Base research facility, there were different kinds of timelines of when people looked like they died. So good question that I have is, were they intentionally gassed? Number 2, this is one that I've read online. Was Randall Flagg a collection of demons known as Legion from Mark 5, 1 through 20? If you remember in the 2003 version of The Gunslinger, Walter mentions that the N-world creature known as Legion, and in both versions of The Stand, Randall Flagg is called Legion. There's also different references out there, so it's not explicitly said, but we know that certainly Stephen King has used a lot of religious symbolism, if not outright religious depictions in his work, so that is a possibility. Question numero 3. How did Charles Campion, the soldier stationed at Project Blue, catch the superflu to begin with? In the 94 miniseries, he was a gate guarding the gate. It malfunctioned, but the superflu, the facility where it was manufactured, those kind of facilities are specifically designed so things don't escape. So how did he catch to begin with? He was actually not in there. In the book, he was in a tower, and in the 2020 miniseries, he was right there in the facility itself. So that's easily explained. But my thoughts are, at least in terms of the book and the 94 miniseries, is he did go back to catch his family and get them out of there. So it's possible the ventilation maybe was shared, or in the book, the tower shared ventilation. That's the only possible conclusion I could think of, because it also supports my theory about them intentionally being gassed at the base. Is he didn't die in 12 minutes or whatever, like the other folks. It took him a few days. So how did he catch it? My guess is ventilation. Question 4. Would the superflu have been averted if Stu Redman had not shut off the pumps at Hap's gas station? Being the idea that if it did explode and Campion crashed into it, it would be the end of that old car, big explosion, perhaps the gas station itself, and one superflu virus. I think this one's pretty easily explained that it would have spread anyway, even if you're going by Campion's timeline, is that he was on the road for a day or 2 days or whatever. Pretty unlikely he wouldn't have encountered anybody on that trip. They would have had to stop to get something to eat. Starkey even made that point in the 94 series where the chance of containing it would have went out the window with Campion's first takeout hamburger. And in the book, he did mention at Hap's, I believe it was Salt Lake City, that they started becoming symptomatic. So I think we can debunk that one as saying that even if Stu had not shut off the pumps and the gas station did explode, the goose was well cooked. Another question about The Stand, and I just want to remind you that I love The Stand. I am not picking this apart. These are just questions. It's good to have a conversation about, and it's interesting. But hey, book's got a book, movie's got a movie. And question number 5 is, why was the superflu so lethal? And that it took, I believe, they mentioned the first folks at the Army base, Blue Base, took 12 minutes for them to die, where the fastest virus that's been known to kill would take a little less than 12 hours, and that's extremely rare. Why was it so quick there? And I think that also supports my previous theory about the folks being gassed at Blue Base. It's impossible for a respiratory virus to multiply fast enough to kill a toast in less than a day, so it does support that theory. And it also could be, another explanation would be the nature of the virus. It was manufactured, so maybe that has something to do with it. And it's also a work of fiction, so we just kind of roll with it. Another question I have about The Stand is, do the survivors have the ability to shine, such as the Gift in Stephen King's The Shining? They're all known to have vivid dreams. They dream about Mother Abigail and RF, and they also have immunity. So do those play hand in hand? And if that's the case, would their kids also be able to shine or have immunity? Now, hereditary immunity, from my understanding, I'm not a scientist, is that it's not hereditary. It's just the strength of the person and their DNA. So you wouldn't really have half immunity to something like Franny's baby did. So was that a weakened strain of the super flu? Was it weakened enough to phase out? I don't know. These are questions that I have. But would their kids also have the ability to shine if that's the case? Who's to say? Pretty interesting timeline, though. Why did Fran and Stu choose to leave Colorado to go back to Ogunquit? I can understand in pre-pandemic days if you'd want to go back to your homeland and raise the family there where you're familiar, but there's nobody there. It seems like they're walking away from a winning situation in Boulder. If there's a medical emergency or something like that, you'd kind of be screwed. Sure, there's enough clothes to last them generations with the way things were, and they could certainly make do on food and shelter, but to walk away from the budding infrastructure there and the support systems and the healthcare, I feel like it's kind of selfish. And it was kind of funny in the 2020 miniseries, if you remember. They finally get to Maine. They leave beautiful Boulder, Colorado, with that beautiful cameo of Mick Garris there. And Franny's kind of like, can't you see why I wanted to go? And Stu's kind of like, oh yeah, this gray, rainy place. This is another question I have. Why did the government try to cover up the superflu? I feel like it would be smarter to just get the word out, like protect as many people as possible. Like, why cover it up? It's clearly happening. I mean, it wasn't pre-television days. I mean, you can see the news and what's going on, and you can only suppress that for so long. The only conclusion I could come up with was that to cover their asses and maybe keep the lie going.
The so-called super flu does not exist.
You know, maybe they will find a cure and they can brush it under the rug, and to keep civilization standing as long as possible. You know, they don't want anarchy. They want to remain control for as much as they can. But it still kind of irked me that they just completely tried to sweep it under the rug. And finally, this is the one question on this ridiculous list I hope somebody can shed some light on. And that is, why did the people affected by the superflu die the way they did? And I don't mean their bodily functions. I mean, it caught up to them in such weird ways. So there were people in the Lincoln Tunnel, and then there were people, if you remember, in when they were looking out for the judge, I think it was Idaho, they were, people were just eating at a diner, and they were dead. And then there were people, making cakes. Were they sick, and they decided to still go out and socialize? I don't know about you, but if I'm coming down with something, I'm not making cakes or getting in the car and sitting in the tunnel. I can understand that the flu mutated and that it would eventually catch up right into the end, but I feel like you would still be symptomatic enough where you're not going to go out and sit at the diner and, eat some cake. And they show people there, with their coffee and everything, just skeletons. What led up to that? Were they fine and all of a sudden it just caught up? If so, that would negate the people that knew they were getting sick, like the sheriff and things like that. So I've always wondered why they were in those settings. It makes for great TV. I mean, they're awesome post-apocalyptic scenery of them in the diner. I mean, it would be so boring if you didn't see that. The church scene makes sense. You go there, you're sick, you think it's the end of the world, the writing's on the wall. I'd be at church too. But I wouldn't be at the diner. I don't hope somebody can explain that. And that's kind of all the questions I have. But I do love The Stand. I think Stephen King's such a fantastic writer, and I will watch this again probably soon since I'm talking about it and it's fresh on my mind. But let me know what you think. Thanks for liking, watching, and subscribing, and let me know in the comments. And I would love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in. God bless.